Today is the worst day of my life. My 2-year-old daughter Isabella and I are in the hospital. She's in a coma, and her doctor just informed me that she may only have 24 hours to live. A year ago, Isabella got extremely sick. First, it was the headaches. I didn't know that at the time because it's hard to diagnose a headache in a toddler. But when she started banging her head all of the time, I immediately took her to the doctor. She would bang against it with her hands, toys, anything she could find. They ran an MRI and everything came back normal. The doctor told me that she just had really bad migraines. Next, it was the seizures. One day she was at daycare and I received a frantic call from her teacher. They had to call an ambulance because Isabella had a seizure during nap time. I thought it could be epilepsy because my nephew has it and it is hereditary. But the doctors ran another MRI and again, everything came back normal. I had that mother's intuition that something just wasn't right, so I decided to get a second opinion. A week before Isabella's appointment with the new doctor, I realized that when I would talk to her, she wouldn't always respond. I thought she was just being stubborn. After all, she was going through the terrible 2 stage. But then she started turning the television up really loud because she said she couldn't hear it. I thought maybe she had an ear infection, but I hadn't noticed her pulling at it, nor had she been cranky. So I scheduled an appointment with her pediatrician, and she said that Isabella did not have an ear infection. I was relieved to hear that, but hoped that it wasn't something more serious. She wouldn't complain of any pain, but she just kept telling me that she couldn't hear. So when we went to the new doctor, I brought that up, along with the seizures and headaches. This doctor ran a CT scan instead of an MRI, and that was the day that Isabella was diagnosed with a brain tumor, the size of a mini marshmallow. I was inconsolable. The doctors told me not to worry, and scheduled her for surgery the very next day. She had to be put to sleep so that the doctors could drill a tiny hole into her skull, and then they would stick a needle in to get a sample. Then a biopsy could be done to see if the tumor was cancerous or not. Isabella didn't know what was going on. She was her usual happy-go-lucky self. I sat in the waiting room for hours, just crying and praying to God to help me. Please, just let everything be all right with Isabella. Let the brain tumor not be cancerous, and then we could just have it removed and she wouldn't need to go through chemotherapy. A few days later, the results came back. The tumor was cancerous. I was distraught. The doctors discussed our options. Number 1, surgery. They could remove the tumor, but there was a possibility that they couldn't get the whole thing, and the tumor was located in close proximity to her brain, so it would be a very risky procedure. Number 2, start chemotherapy as soon as possible before the cancer could spread. However, chemo will probably make her feel very sick. Number 3, combine the two, because they usually work effectively together. I decided to go with the chemo option because I was scared to death to send my baby under the knife. So she began chemo a few days later. She hated it, being hooked up to machines for hours. It was very hard for her to stay still for long periods of time. So we would play her favorite game, peekaboo, all of the time just to keep her mind off of it. Peekaboo is our version of hide and seek, and it helped the time pass quicker. Since Isabella was too sick to get out of bed to play hide and seek, she would cover her eyes and count to 10, while I hid close by where she would be able to find me easily. When she found me, she would call out, "Peekaboo, I found you." After a few weeks, she lost 10 pounds and her hair began to fall out. She would barely eat and was tired all of the time. A month after starting chemo, she was still having headaches and seizures, and when the doctor did another CT scan, the tumor had grown, so the chemo wasn't working. She said that we could keep trying, but she recommended the surgery. As much as I didn't want to, I decided to listen to the doctors. She was all I had left in the world. I became a single mother 6 months after Isabella was born, when my husband was killed in a motorcycle accident. So I signed all of the necessary paperwork and the surgery was scheduled for the following week. Isabella had to stay in the hospital until then so that doctors could monitor her because they stopped her chemo. Today was the day of the surgery. This morning, I kissed Isabella goodbye and watched them wheel her away, not knowing if I would ever see her alive again. I thought it was painful when I was in labor with her for 12 hours, but waiting for her to come out of surgery, that was the longest 6 hours of my life. The doctors came out to get me and took me back to her recovery room. I thought she was still asleep. She looked so peaceful and happy. I kissed her gently on the forehead and said one last prayer before the doctor came in. Please, let the cancer be gone and never come back. The doctor gave me devastating news. She was in a coma. They didn't expect her to live through the night. I sat by her bedside and cried and continued to pray to anyone who would listen, but there was no change in Isabella's condition. Then that night, I awoke to a loud beeping sound. She had flatlined. I screamed, "Help! My baby's dying!" I pleaded and begged, "Please, God, someone, anyone, help me. I can't live without her. Whatever the costs, whatever it takes for her to get better, I'm willing to pay that price. Whoever is listening, good or bad, if you have the power to save her, please do it." Doctors rushed in and revived her, but she was dead for a whole minute. Then, miraculously, the 5th day, she just woke up from her coma. The doctor discussed her post-surgery care with me. She would have to stay in the hospital for another week so that they could monitor her, and then, if everything was okay after that, I could take her home. But she needed to stay in bed for the first few weeks and get lots of rest. They asked if I would like to hire an in-home nurse to help me out, but the insurance didn't cover that, and I didn't have the money to pay for it. On Isabella's last day in the hospital, I was so relieved to see her smiling and talking. She was still really weak, but the doctor told me that everything looked good and she was released early the next morning. There wasn't much she could do since she had to stay in bed. I didn't want her watching TV all of the time, so I came up with other things that we could do together. We would read to each other, she'd help me make the grocery store list, and we had tea parties. One morning I was in the kitchen washing the dishes when Isabella called from her room.
Do you want to play peekaboo?
I walked to her room and smiled. "Sure, sweetie." She smiled back and then hid under her blanket and began to count.
1, 2, 3.
I looked around deciding where I should hide and settled on a spot between the bookshelf and dresser.
4, 5, 6, 7.
I slid into the empty space.
8, 9, 10.
I waited a minute while she looked around trying to find me.
Where are you, Mommy?
I stuck just my hand around the corner of the bookshelf and waited to see if she saw me. When she still didn't say anything, I knocked on the bookshelf 3 times.
Peekaboo! I found you, Mommy.
I jumped out and ran over to her bed and began to gently tickle her. When she stopped laughing to catch her breath, she told me.
I like this game.
I hugged her tightly and replied, "Me too, sweetie." Over the next few weeks, Isabella's health drastically improved. She was able to get out of bed and move around, and before long, she was back to her old self again. Although she was permanently deaf in her left ear, the headaches and seizures had stopped completely. 3 months after the surgery, we went back in to have another CT scan done and found out that the cancer was completely gone. I was so relieved. I guess all of that praying had actually done something. I finally decided that it was time to go back to work now that Isabella was feeling better, so I put her back in daycare. On my first day back at work, I worried about her all day. I knew she was fine, so I was just having a hard time adjusting to going back to work and leaving her. When I went to pick her up after work that day, her teacher told me that she had scared some of the other kids. I asked what she did and was told that she tried to play a game with them, a game called peekaboo. I explained to her teacher that we played the game all of the time at home, and that it was harmless, so I wasn't sure why the kids had been so scared. She told me after Isabella found them, she was chasing them around the playground with a sharp pointy stick in her hand, screaming.
I don't think I like you.
I was surprised. Isabella had never gotten into trouble at daycare before. When we got home, I asked her why she had done that, and she told me that she didn't like them. I asked her if they had done something to her, and she told me no. I told her that she would have to sit in timeout for 10 minutes since she got into trouble today at daycare, and she became very upset.
I don't think you love Mommy.
She yelled at me the whole time while I stood at the kitchen counter. When her timeout was over, I approached her and placed her tiny little hands inside of mine. Of course I love you. I love you more than anything in this world. But you can't act like that, okay?
Sorry, Mommy.
She said and then ran away. Isabella played in her room while I was preparing dinner. When I was done, I headed upstairs to get her, and her door was closed. I heard her talking, so I quietly opened it, only a crack, and peeked inside. Our German Shepherd, Jasper, was running recklessly around Isabella's room. She was crawling on the ground, chasing him, saying,
Peekaboo, peekaboo.
I burst inside when I realized what she was holding in her hand. She raised it high into the air and was just about to plunge it into Jasper's back when I screamed, "What are you doing?" She was caught by surprise, and she quickly dropped the scissors onto the carpet. She smiled at me shyly, asking,
Do you love me, Mommy?
I told her yes and then sent her downstairs for dinner. I picked up the scissors and carried them down with me to the kitchen. Then I placed them back into their designated spot in the knife block sitting on the counter. I watched Isabella as she sat there eating her dinner in silence. She acted as if nothing had happened, like I didn't just catch her trying to hurt our dog. What was going on with her? First, getting into trouble at daycare, and now this? As I was munching on my grilled chicken Caesar salad, I remembered something that her doctor had told me after her surgery. Patients with brain tumors may experience some behavioral changes. But why was she trying to hurt people? The next day, I scheduled an emergency appointment with her doctor. She didn't seem surprised when I told her what was going on. It's not uncommon. I've had other patients show this type of behavior after surgery as well. Well, hearing that made me feel a little better, knowing that we weren't the only ones who were dealing with this. On the way home, we headed to the grocery store to stock up on groceries and supplies. There was a really bad snowstorm coming later that night. In our town, Anchorage, Alaska, we were expecting almost 4 feet of snow in 24 hours. The store was packed. While we waited in the long line to pay for our things, Isabella asked me if we could play peekaboo. No, sweetie. I promised her that we will play when we get home. After waiting nearly an hour in line, we finally make it to the register. I realized that my cashier was Kenzie's mom. Kenzie goes to daycare with Isabella. Hey, I greeted her with a smile. She just stood there stone-faced and began to ring up my items. I assumed she was annoyed because of all of the customers, but when I caught her glaring at Isabella, I knew it had to be something else. As she handed me my receipt, I replied, "Bye, have a nice day." She still didn't respond. She just started ringing up the next customer's order. When I was putting my cart away, I overheard her telling them, "Her daughter is crazy. She tried to stab my child in the eye with a stick at daycare." I was so angry. As I was leaving, I screamed, "There is nothing wrong with my child." When we got home, Isabella colored at the dining room table while I put all of the groceries away. When I was finished, I told her that I was just going to lay down for a few minutes, so I turned on some cartoons for her and lay down on the sofa in the living room. I awoke to Isabella standing across from the sofa in the hallway, staring at me.
Do you want to play peekaboo?
Now that she was feeling better, we went back to the traditional way of playing hide-and-seek, but Isabella still called the game peekaboo. "Sure, sweetie," I told her as I rubbed my eyes and got up from the sofa. "Do you want to count or do you want me to?" She ran away giggling. I couldn't hear her counting anymore, so I searched for a place to hide. She was getting better at the game. I used to have to hide in obvious places where it was easy for her to find me, but now I could hide in closets or other rooms because she would actually open up the doors and check there. As soon as I found a good spot to hide, the power cut off. I placed my hand on the knob, ready to run to Isabella. I expected her to cry out and be frightened. The house was pitch black, but instead she called out,
Mommy, I'm gonna kiss you.
Then I heard her tiny little footsteps running throughout the house. I don't know why, but chills ran through me. I quietly opened the coat closet door and then closed it softly behind me. I tiptoed to the kitchen and slid open the drawer where I kept the flashlights. I grabbed one and turned it on, shining it from side to side. Then I flashed it towards the window to see how bad the storm had gotten. It was really sticking now, probably about 5 inches already. It was worse than I thought. I didn't see Isabella anywhere, so I flicked the flashlight off. I didn't want her to know where I was. Then I heard her voice coming from the back room.
Peekaboo, I find you, that one.
Next, I heard a horrible yelping sound that rattled me to my core. Right away, I thought back to when I found Isabella chasing Jasper with the scissors. I started to call out to him, forgetting all about the game, hoping that he would come to me. Even though I tried to yell, it came out as a whimper. I don't know why, but all of my senses were telling me to stay quiet. I felt my way through the kitchen, but cried out when I rolled my ankle after stepping on her Barbie car in the darkness. I could feel it already starting to swell. While wincing in pain, I heard Isabella giggle again. I cut the flashlight back on and shined it onto my foot. I got up limping and went to go find Jasper. I continued to whisper his name, expecting him to come out any second. Right as I made it to the back room, I called out to him. I wasn't able to see anything, and something told me not to turn on the flashlight. I heard a loud clattering sound of metal and wood crash to the ground in the kitchen. The moonlight was shining through the patio doors, and I saw Isabella run past the hallway with a knife in her hand. Instantly, I knew it was the knife block that she had knocked over. Shutting the door as quietly as I could, I backed up away from it, trying to not make the wood floorboards creak. I slipped on something wet on the ground. When I flicked on the flashlight, my heart sank. It was Jasper, stabbed to a bloody pulp. There was blood everywhere. The scissors were lodged into his mouth, down his throat. It looked like he had been trying to get away. He was backed up into the corner underneath my work desk. I thought to myself, this isn't right. This isn't my Isabella. She hasn't been the same since her surgery, and I don't think this qualifies as no damn common behavioral issues. What did I pray for? Who did I pray to? Now that I know this isn't my daughter, this was something evil. I quietly opened the door, making my way to the kitchen. I have to defend myself. A door slammed, and I heard her making her way back downstairs. I hobbled my way into the living room before she could see me, or so I thought.
I see you, Mommy.
Darted behind the sofa, my heart racing.
Mommy.
Isabella creepily called out to me. I could hear her walking around the living room. As she approached the sofa, I tried to get away, but my leg got caught on something. When I glanced back, I saw I had a bloody slash across the back of my thigh. When I looked back up, I shined the flashlight and saw the knife get pulled back from the edge of the sofa where my feet were. I ran as fast as I could upstairs as she screamed.
Come back here.
I was scared to death. My beloved 2-year-old daughter was a psychopath. She was trying to kill me, and there was nowhere for me to go, nowhere to run. The snowstorm had started hours ago, so the roads were already impassable. Now the power had gone out, and I had no way to call the police. I left my cell phone outside in my car. I had gotten distracted earlier after bringing Isabella and the groceries in, and I forgot to go back out there to get it. It was almost dead anyway, so the battery had probably drained by now. When I reached the top of the stairs with my one good foot now, I fell backwards, tumbling down each step. I hit the bottom with a loud thud. As I glanced back up the stairs, I saw that Isabella had strategically arranged some of her toys up there. My thigh where I had been stabbed was throbbing, and now so was the rest of me. I managed to slide around the corner into the guest room, but before I slammed and locked the door, I saw Isabella walking up the hallway, waving the knife back and forth as it shimmered in the darkness.
Don't run, Mommy.
I crawled over to the window and pushed it open. Gusts of wind and cold snow hit me in the face. I placed one foot over the windowsill and then heard her angrily striking the door with the knife. "Isabella, stop it! You're scaring me!" As I pulled my other leg over, I flipped and fell right into a snowbank. Once I regained my focus, I climbed my way out and raced to my car. Damn it, I forgot the keys. My feet were on fire. I was wearing a pair of fuzzy fur socks, but they absorbed the snow as soon as they made contact. I stood there pondering whether I should try to make it to the nearest neighbor's house, which happened to be 3 miles away, and who knows how long it would take me to walk there in this blizzard. The only thing I could do was go back inside to get my keys. I would rather die in a car accident than be murdered at the hands of my own daughter. So I walked around to the back of the house because I knew that the patio door wasn't locked. I had lost my flashlight somewhere in the snowbank, so after entering the house again, I headed back over to the kitchen drawer where I kept them. When I pulled it open, all of the flashlights were gone. I would have to make my way upstairs to my bedroom in the dark. So I waited a few moments to see if I heard anything that would tell me where Isabella was hiding. When I entered the living room, I caught a glimpse of her. She was in the dining room, peeking out the window, searching for me. So I tiptoed upstairs and made sure to step over her toys this time. But my foot accidentally brushed against one of them and it started to sing. I raced down the hall towards my bedroom as fast as I possibly could. For some reason, my door didn't have a lock, and I'd never felt the need to have one since it was just me and Isabella here. I grabbed my keys from the bowl on my dresser and then tried to push it in front of the door to block her from getting in, but I wasn't strong enough. The door opened before I could get the dresser in front of it. I grabbed the lamp from my nightstand and wielded it like a bat as I screamed, "Isabella, stop it! I don't want to hurt you." Not seeing or hearing anything, I make my way back into the hallway. Then I hear her singing and giggling through the halls.
Peekaboo, peekaboo.
I heard her tiny little footsteps creak back downstairs, so I did the same, trying to make my way back to the car. The toys in her room began going off, so I knew that's where she was. So I made a run for the back door. But between my swollen ankle and my cut thigh, I wasn't moving as fast as I knew I could. When I finally made it, I slammed and locked the car door behind me. While sticking the key into the ignition, I was crying, thinking, what have my prayers done to my little girl? I know her heart only stopped for a minute, but I don't think it was Isabella that the doctors brought back. I looked up and saw tiny footprints leading from her bedroom window to the car. As my eyes focused in on the rearview mirror, I saw peekaboo written in blood. Then I felt a sharp sensation pierce the back of my neck, and with one last giggle, Isabella said,
I found you, Mommy. I love this game.
"Special guest, my 2-year-old daughter, little Nina. Say hi."
Hiya, buddy. Hiya, baby. My mans. This was fun. Bye, buddy.
Subscribe for a new story Mondays, Wednesdays, and don't forget Saturdays. See you next time on
Nina's Nightmares.
Really? You're supposed to click the like button, not me. Ugh.